Chivalry 2 and Mordhau, the two most recent medieval slasher games, were with around 2 million sold copies each, a huge commercial success. And well, one might wonder now why there are still so little games of this type to choose from. The medieval slasher genre was born way back in 2007, when two modders came up with a Half-Life 2 mod called Age of Chivalry. And yet 15 years later, one can still count the games that have been released since then on one hand. And there are several reasons for that. Big studios nowadays don't like or are not allowed to take risks anymore. It is safer to make the 25th Call of Duty game or another Spider-Man game than it is to create a whole new franchise in a genre that very few people have experience with. But with the commercial success of Mordhau and Chivalry 2, it was just a matter of time until indie developers that have the required know-how hopped onto the train. In this video we shall have a look at the future of the medieval slasher genre. 6 upcoming titles that have been in development for quite a bit and will hopefully bring some life and variety to this type of games. But before we jump into it, a quick word from the sponsor of today's video, Atlas VPN. Atlas VPN is a reputable top quality VPN service with 750 servers across the globe that has an absolute killer deal going on right now. With Atlas you can get access to region-locked streaming platforms, websites, apps, sports events, games and more. Even for gamers, a VPN can have huge benefits. In some games, like Chivalry 2 for example, there is no way of choosing the server region you want to play on. With Atlas VPN, no problem. With a single click you can simply set a different location and the game will connect you to the nearest server from that set location. Using Atlas VPN can also help with unstable connections and packet loss if there is a routing problem. And the good thing is, you don't need to be tech savvy to get all these benefits. In fact, the Atlas software is super intuitive and easy to use. Right now Atlas VPN is running a huge discount and you can get a 3-year subscription for just $1.83 a month with a 30-day money-back guarantee. Click on the link in the video description below and level up your online experience with Atlas VPN. Alright, so the first game we will have a look at is Renown. Renown is an upcoming medieval slasher survival game. Think of a combination of Mordhau and Rust. You spawn with nothing, gather resources, build, and then raid and fight other groups of players. There will be no leveling system, so players will be equal at any point throughout their time playing. Things that will make a difference are individual skill, different weapons, and different armor tiers. Renown doesn't have a public release date yet, but backers are already allowed to access the combat module for testing. The game has currently an NDA in effect, so I can only openly talk about things that are public. Renown's main emphasis lies on skill-based PvP combat that revolves around feints, drags and excels. You can check out recent gameplay footage on YouTube from the combat demo they had during the Steam Next Fest, where their NDA was not in effect. The combat is very competitive and skill gaps between players will be very big. There is a plan, however, to give server owners extensive tools to host their own private servers with their own rules. I will leave a link to their crowdfunding campaign in the video description below in case you would like to check out the different perks and support this project. Next, we have Mobius. Mobius was recently announced as an upcoming competitive medieval slasher game. The game will be focused around a 5v5 team objective game mode with ranked play. There will be different classes like frontliners, backliners, flankers and duelists. Combat-wise, Mobius goes with a timed parry system and no chambers, but some new mechanics like a perfect parry. I guess we will have to wait and see how the combat plays out once it is more polished and playtested. I'm not sure how popular a purely competitive slasher can be, but the game for sure has a few things going for it. First and foremost, Mobius will be free to play. And while free to play obviously brings some drawbacks, like more smurfing, more cheating, and heavy cosmetic monetization, which not everyone likes, I think that if you want to create a big competitive online game in this day and age, free to play is the way to go. And secondly, having a 5v5 as the main game mode allows for skill-based matchmaking, which should help to resolve one of Mordhau's biggest problems, namely the high entry floor that was partly responsible for the dwindling player base. Also worth pointing out is that Mobius will ship with modding tools at launch. The game is still extremely early in its development and there is no set release date as of yet. The next game on the list is Sinis. Sinis is an upcoming medieval and fantasy slasher MMORPG. The game will have an open world design and be mainly focused around PvP. There will also be PvE activities, like leveling, gathering, crafting, and several professions like hunting, fishing, smithing and such. Gear progression will be primarily cosmetic and will only have a minor impact on how powerful a character can become. Armor and weapon crafting will provide deep customization options and offer many opportunities to alter both the performance and aesthetics of equipment. In this demo we can have a first look at combat in Sinis. The animations already look very impressive, even though the game is still very early in development. From their Discord sneak peeks, I can already tell that the art style of this game will be absolutely gorgeous. The art direction seems to have that heavy Dark Souls vibe to it. Bringing fantasy elements to this genre is a very nice fit, and I can't wait with what they will come up with. Sinis has no set release date yet, but it looks like we will still have to wait for quite a while, as the current roadmap shows a planned pre-alpha for Q3 of 2022. The game will have a crowdfunding campaign at some point, so we definitely should keep an eye out for that. Next, we have Valhalla Harbinger. And oh boy, where do we start here? Valhalla had its Kickstarter campaign back in 2018, where the studio promised a medieval slasher battle royale game. About a year ago, they decided to scrap the plan with the battle royale and instead go with a survival game. The big mistake they made was selling the game as a so-called pre-beta on Steam for the public. Valhalla Harbinger is still miles away from a playable gameplay loop, has lots of bought in-game assets, and people are wondering what the devs were doing the past 4 years with their Kickstarter money. I almost didn't take the game into this list, but they recently put out a few updates that look somewhat like progress. There are different attack directions and a parry system, but it is hard to tell what the combat or the game will look like if they're ever gonna finish it. Valhalla Harbinger is also pretty much the only game on this list where I'm not sure if they have any input from people that have a good understanding of medieval slasher combat. So I wouldn't hold my breath on this one, but I will still keep an eye on it. Maybe they can turn it around. Next we have a game called Contingent. Contingent is an upcoming hybrid between medieval slasher and real-time strategy game. The game focuses on skill-based combat combined with mass AI warfare and will feature both PvP and PvE game modes. The single player will be part sandbox and part story-driven with a strong narrative. The scope of the single player, however, will heavily rely on the outcome of the Kickstarter campaign, which the game will have in the somewhat near future. But apparently, at minimum, players can expect a Bannerlord-style PvE campaign experience at full launch, which would be quite impressive. The core focus of the game, however, will be on different PvP modes. Contingent will have two different perspectives: the traditional first and third person view, where all the personal combat will occur, and the commander view, which will allow to order troops around from a top-down perspective with a tactical map. Very interesting concept in my opinion, and I'm really curious how this will turn out. Contingent's planned release is somewhere in 2023 or 2024, but this is subject to change and highly dependent on the funds raised in their Kickstarter campaign, which will start at the end of this year. This is also the time where we hopefully start to see some early gameplay footage. The last game on this list is Admortem. Admortem is an upcoming medieval slasher game made by a group of veteran players that were unhappy with the direction, or let's say the lack of direction, Mordhau was taking. From the fact that these guys were heavily involved in the Chivalry and Mordhau comp scene, I wouldn't be surprised if Admortem has a heavy emphasis on competitive play with a high skill ceiling. The game has been in development for around 1.5 years by now, and there are basically no details public as of yet. The developers mentioned that they will only start showing off their game once it is in a state that makes a good first impression. In the meantime, we can have a look at some concept art that they post semi-regularly on their social media. Particularly interesting is this image, which gives the impression that Admortem will have fantasy elements. But everything more that we try to read into the game design would just be speculation at this point. Admortem has no set release date as of yet, but will probably have a crowdfunding campaign at some point. Yet I wouldn't really expect any big news anytime soon. Medieval slasher games have always been seen as a niche genre, but I think this doesn't have to be true. If you look at the entertainment industry as a whole, fighting with medieval weapons in a medieval-inspired environment is not niche at all. Especially combined with fantasy elements, there are some huge mainstream franchises like The Lord of the Rings or The Witcher. But anyway guys, that's it for this overview. Let me know in the comment section what game you look forward to the most and what looks most promising to you. If you enjoyed watching this video, then please leave a like and hit subscribe for future medieval slasher content. As always, thank you all for watching and see you soon.